I don't think that would happen again. It wouldn't happen. And Rick's dead. We can't go back there.
He doesn't speak quickly. Every word feels weighed, measured, tuned like a note that might last forever. David Gilmour has spent a lifetime in the glow and shadow of Pink Floyd, the band that turned isolation into anthem and silence into thunder.
We had a quite serious disagreement about the recording of Comfortably Numb.
For decades, fans searched for an answer. How could a band that built worlds out of sound come apart so completely? The truth was never one explosion. It was pressure, creative, personal, philosophical, slow, silent, and unstoppable. Gilmour never shouted blame, he played it. Every solo, every sigh of feedback, another clue. Behind the scenes, friendships frayed, ambitions diverged, and the studio became a mirror, reflecting not harmony, but ego. We listen to the man himself, and trace the fault lines beneath the legend. Because the fall of Pink Floyd wasn't just a breakup, it was a reckoning between genius, vision, and pride. Here is the real reason Pink Floyd fell apart: the birth of sound and vision. Before the fractures, there was electricity, a creative storm running through London's underground. Gilmour joined Pink Floyd in 1968 as Syd Barrett's light faded. What he found was chaos turned into potential, a band experimenting without a map. In smoky studios, he and Waters learned to shape atmosphere into structure. Metal and the Dark Side of the Moon weren't accidents. They were alignment, until the compass began to spin. At first, everything about Pink Floyd was discovery. Gilmour brought melody where there had been abstraction, turning sound experiments into cinematic experiences. He once said, "We didn't think in terms of singles or hits, it was about the mood of a whole record." That mindset became their blueprint. Albums weren't just a set of songs, they were a single unbroken idea, immersive, deliberate, and emotionally cohesive. The early years carried a rare equilibrium. Gilmour handled the texture, Waters defined the themes. Their partnership thrived on tension, one sculpting beauty, the other testing limits. Together they built The Dark Side of the Moon, where perfection met vulnerability. The studio wasn't just a space, it was a laboratory of sound, where mistakes were ingredients, not flaws. Engineer Alan Parsons later reflected, "They were meticulous. Every sound had intention." That precision transformed their process into ritual. Every take mattered. Every echo had meaning. Gilmour's guitar didn't just decorate the songs, it narrated them. His tone carried warmth through Waters' stark lyrics, giving shape to despair. Their chemistry turned technical mastery into emotional storytelling. But success carries gravity. The unity that once defined them began to strain under its weight. The Dark Side of the Moon's triumph built expectation, and expectation built walls. When Wish You Were Here arrived, it felt both triumphant and haunted, a love letter and a eulogy in one. The record mourned Barrett, but somewhere within, it mourned the band itself. Gilmour's solo wept without words, a kind of slow goodbye wrapped in harmony and regret. Critics called it melancholy made majestic, and they were right. Beneath that shimmering perfection was a quiet fracture, the sound of a band realizing that brilliance and balance can't live in harmony forever. The dream had reached its peak, and from there, the only way left was down. Power, perfection, and the first cracks. By the mid-70s, Waters' pen ruled the room. Gilmour's melodies strained beneath it. Recording Animals, tension thickened like smoke. Lyrics rewritten overnight, mixes redone in silence. Gilmour later said he felt squeezed out of his own band. The music was immaculate, but the spirit fractured. They were still making masterpieces, but now they were making them separately, even while standing in the same room.
I mean, obviously he writes most of the stuff, and he writes the concept of what's going on, and therefore he thinks he has more of a right to say how it should be produced.
The band had once operated like a single instrument, 4 parts breathing in sync, improvising structure out of sound. But by Animals, that chemistry had hardened into hierarchy. Waters arrived with sketches that were closer to sermons than songs. His lyrics, cynical, brilliant, unflinching, dissected greed and dehumanization with surgical focus. Gilmour admired the ambition, but sensed the air changing. The collaboration that had defined the Dark Side of the Moon was vanishing, replaced by solitary labor under fluorescent light. Gilmour later reflected, "It was a strange time. The band was working, but we weren't together. The sessions became exercises in endurance. Days ran long, conversations short. Waters sought control through precision. Gilmour sought freedom through sound. The middle ground between them shrank with each mix. Even moments of brilliance, like the soaring guitar breaks on Dogs, came laced with quiet resentment. Waters later admitted that Animals was a record made through frustration, but frustration, in Pink Floyd's hands, still produced excellence. The record's bleak energy, its mechanical pulse, mirrored the emotional state of its makers. It was art born from fatigue, and it showed. Each song felt both deliberate and desperate, as if the band was pushing through exhaustion to prove they still could. Critics hailed Animals as a dark, intellectual triumph. Yet beneath its structure lay the sound of disconnection. The songs dissect society's manipulation, but they also expose the band's own fractures. One reviewer noted, Pink Floyd were writing about control while losing their own. By its release, the cracks had become lines of division. Gilmour's solos carried melancholy instead of defiance. Waters' voice cut sharper, colder. Animals was the band's mirror, reflecting mastery, but also isolation. In chasing perfection, they had built a cage made of sound, beautiful, brilliant, and quietly breaking. The Wall, art as war. The Wall was both monument and meltdown. Waters conceived it. Gilmour fought to finish it. The studio became a battlefield of tape reels and tempers. When Gilmour recorded Comfortably Numb, the solo cut through the tension like a confession. He called the sessions the most difficult of my life. The album conquered the world, but the cost was measured in trust.
How did you feel about the use of the wall as a concept?
In Roger's show at the Wall?
Yeah.
No, it was mostly Roger's brainchild, and he's entitled to do what he wishes with it, and I have no objections to it. No.
By 1979, Pink Floyd was no longer a band in harmony, but a machine of extraordinary precision, powered by personal distance. Waters had become the architect of everything: concept, narrative, tone. His script was exhaustive, his control absolute. The story of isolation he was writing wasn't fiction, it was autobiography disguised as allegory, and in the process, everyone else became a character in his vision. Rick Wright, the band's quiet anchor, was dismissed mid-recording. Nick Mason withdrew behind the drums, methodical but subdued. Gilmour, meanwhile, resisted quietly, translating frustration into music that burned with feeling. He later admitted, when the words failed, the music had to speak. That sentiment crystallized in Comfortably Numb, a song born of pure contradiction, Waters' cold narrative, and Gilmour's soaring plea for release. Every note of that solo feels like a negotiation, art and ego locked in combat, beauty struggling to breathe inside control. Gilmour's tone sounds almost mournful, a fragile human sound rising from the machinery of concept. Even now, decades later, it remains one of rock's purest expressions of transcendence through conflict, the sound of resistance disguised as grace. Despite exhaustion, The Wall grew into an empire. The record sold tens of millions, the stage shows redefined scale, and its imagery became iconic. But for the band, the grandeur was hollow. Night after night, a literal wall rose between them and their audience, the symbol made real. Gilmour later said the performances felt more like theatre than music. The intimacy that once defined Pink Floyd had vanished. One journalist captured it perfectly. They built a masterpiece so powerful it buried its makers beneath it. When the tour ended, applause faded into silence. The Wall stood complete, a stunning monument to genius, ego, exhaustion, and the cost of creation. The long silence and the battle for the name. After the final cut, the air was gone. Waters declared the band finished. Gilmour refused. What followed was not reconciliation, but litigation. Headlines called it ego. Gilmour called it survival. He built a momentary lapse of reason from ashes, turning grief into structure. It wasn't just about keeping the name, it was about keeping the music breathing when everything else had stopped. In the years that followed, silence replaced sound. Pink Floyd, once a single creative organism, had splintered into two philosophies. Waters saw the legacy as something pure, finished, a statement complete in itself. Gilmour saw it as something alive, worth saving. The court battle that followed was brutal but strangely poetic. Two men fighting over who held the right to memory. By 1987, Gilmour carried the name forward, but not the weight alone. He rebuilt the band piece by piece, calling back Nick Mason and bringing in new collaborators. Rick Wright returned as a session player at first, hesitant but loyal. The new sound was sleek, atmospheric and modern, the echo of the old spirit, refracted through change. Gilmour later reflected that making a momentary lapse of reason was like starting over without the map. And yet, that disorientation became the album's pulse. Songs like Learning to Fly and On the Turning Away weren't just tracks, they were declarations of independence. The record proved that Pink Floyd could exist beyond its founder, that art could outlast authorship. The tour that followed was enormous. Stadiums filled once more, this time under Gilmour's quiet command. Waters protested publicly, dismissing the new music as imitation, but fans disagreed. They came not just for nostalgia, but for continuity, for proof that something lost could still live. One critic wrote, "Pink Floyd's rebirth wasn't about reclaiming a name, it was about reclaiming belief." By the early 1990s, peace settled, not friendship, but distance without fury. The war over the name had ended, but the echo of that conflict lingered in every note. In the end, both men were right. Waters had closed the book, Gilmour had kept it open. The reunion that wasn't about forgiveness. Decades later, in 2005, the impossible happened. Gilmour and Waters shared a stage again at Live 8. One night, 4 songs, no future plans, just acknowledgement. It wasn't reconciliation, it was remembrance of what they once built together and the price they paid to build it.
Please welcome David Gilmour!
The reunion was brief, but it echoed across generations. For the audience, it felt like time itself holding its breath, an impossible flash of harmony, reborn under the summer sky. For Gilmour and Waters, it was quieter, more internal. Their history was carved in decades of silence and stubbornness, but in that moment, they weren't rivals or litigants. They were musicians again, standing in the same light they'd once commanded together. The crowd wasn't watching forgiveness, they were watching recognition, the kind that only music can grant. As the set unfolded, Breathe, Money, Wish You Were Here, and Comfortably Numb, something rare occurred. Neither man led. The balance that had long been broken found its center, if only for a moment. Every note carried both pain and pride. Each lyric was a ghost of what they'd endured. For the audience, it was more than nostalgia. It was history finding its voice again, if only for one last chorus. Gilmour later reflected, "It was good to be reminded of what we could do together." That single line carried the weight of years unspoken, regret softened by time, and affection disguised as restraint. The music had become a kind of language, a bridge neither man could fully cross, but neither wanted to burn again. When the lights faded, offers came flooding in. Tours, albums, interviews, the world begging for another miracle. But Gilmour refused. He said continuing would have ruined the purity of that night. Even Waters later admitted it was moving, almost cleansing, to share that stage again. For 20 minutes, the wall fell. And when it did, the music became what it had always been, the truth neither man could deny, and the piece they could only play, not say. In the end, Pink Floyd's story isn't about villains or heroes. It's about the fragile balance between vision and control. The same force that created their magic also tore it apart. Gilmour and Waters each carried a different truth about what Pink Floyd should be, and in their struggle, they built something eternal. Their music became proof that conflict, when channeled through art, can echo louder than harmony ever could. What remains is timeless. Wish You Were Here, Comfortably Numb, Shine on You, Crazy Diamond. Songs that still speak of loss, brilliance, and the price of perfection. Because sometimes the real reason a band falls apart isn't betrayal or pride, it's simply that the dream grew too large for its dreamers. What about you? Do you think Pink Floyd could have survived together? Or was the split inevitable? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more journeys into rock's defining truths.